How do you view the stance that they're taking, and also, Facebook's argument that ultimately this is going to hurt small businesses?
I think that you want to empower people with more information over time. And so actually highlighting this issue is not necessarily a bad thing. But when it is you have to look at this in a way where businesses have to make sure that they're applying the same thing to the same standards to their own platforms. And, express opt-ins for only third-party information where there's a longstanding relationship is definitely a change in practices. But I'm hopeful that both Apple and Facebook will more aggressively present these options to users and get that affirmative opt-in consent. I think the move toward that is not necessarily a bad thing over time.
Right, but Facebook's argument and stance, really pitting themselves against Apple, and they say standing up for small businesses, it's kind of putting them on the other side of privacy, though. You've had Google come out a few weeks ago saying that they want to be on the right side of privacy, and it just feels like Facebook, maybe it's PR strategy, or what it's actually doing is putting itself on the other side. Are they explaining themselves well enough? Are they really, is there as much to that argument that they're sticking up for small businesses?
I think that there's a lot to that argument that they are sticking up for small businesses, is that a standard has developed here in terms of the way that IDFA, the advertising identifier, is used that allows small businesses to connect with consumers easily. Apple's disrupting that process in the name of privacy, and Facebook is saying, well, wait a minute, there's actually some challenges to that too. Ultimately, I think more communication and more information on all sides about this is a good thing. The unilateral action by a platform provider is something that should cause some pause, and that Facebook is trying to point that out, I think, in its messaging. Over time, the aggressive presentation to consumers of what data is collected, I think, is healthy for all of these companies. That more knowledge on the part of consumers is better, and more understanding about the way that advertising works and that targeted advertising actually can be very consumer beneficial is one of the things that the companies are going to have to do a better job at.
So, Chris, it sounds like you're saying, we can sit here and we can talk about how it's going to impact someone's quarter or how it's going to impact the gunfight between Apple and Facebook, but that the larger point is that over time, incrementally, consumers are going to be conditioned to ask, wait, this new app, how will I be tracked? And that's not a question they've asked just instinctively so far.
I don't think more knowledge here is bad for consumers at all. I think that the practices that develop need to be scrutinized. And I think you've seen that regulatorily with GDPR and a number of other actions. And that can actually be, I think most companies should see that as a long-term healthy thing. But in the short term, there's definitely a competitive knife fight that goes on between platforms that are trying to advantage themselves by changing the rules midstream. So there's a lot to be said for both sides here. But more than anything else, if consumers are empowered and that they're given more knowledge, that actually makes for a healthier ecosystem over time.
Right, a fair point. Chris, want to shift gears for my last question and sneak one in on the NBA. As co-owner of the Sacramento Kings, you've really seen the rise of NFTs in the NBA with Top Shot. Tom Brady and the Manning brothers jumping in on that bandwagon. Do you think that the NFL ultimately gets more involved? And do you think that this rise and the huge amounts of money tied to NFTs will ultimately affect the finances of pro sports leagues?
Well, I mean, I think that you've seen sort of hundreds of millions of dollars transacted already through NBA Top Shot, and we're very excited about that as the league. And you're definitely going to see other leagues get into this. And you just saw the Topps SPAC IPO coming as well, in part because I think NFTs are seen as part of their future. So I think that the NBA Top Shot example through Dapper and with Alchemy as their backup, I think you've seen some pretty incredible moves, and I think that you'll continue to see that from other sports leagues. NFTs can get overblown too, though, and I think that the sports card trading market makes a lot of sense. We'll see what happens in the broader art market, though.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.